mentioned yet, that needs to be mentioned as part of my work, my career, was that when I was called to First United Church, part of the one of the conditions was that I had to be willing to go to Toronto for 6 weeks and take a new course that was available at the Canadian Urban Training Project.
Mm-hmm.
And it had just started in 1966 with its first group of ministers and priests, and it was sponsored by the United Presbyterian, Anglican, and Roman Catholic churches. And Dr. Edgar File was the director. I knew him. He was in Emmanuel College 2 years ahead of me, and we played hockey together at Emmanuel. And he went to Boston and did a doctorate there, and came back to Winnipeg and was in charge of a mission, a city mission there, and then became the director in Toronto of this urban training project. And it was a residential thing. We had to live in for 6 weeks, and the whole idea was to prepare a new group of ministers, priests, 2 or 3 times a year, whenever they could mount the course, so that they would better understand the changes in our cities and the way in which the church had to adjust its ways, not just giving out groceries to the poor, not just handing out a meal tickets to people that were poor, but helping them to stand on their own and make their own decisions. Like, this was the big challenge at that point, and the churches had no training for that. So I was there from the last few days of January 1967 until the middle of March. Yeah, middle of March, because our third daughter was born here in Vancouver while I was in Toronto, and one of the major parts of this course was that we had to live on the streets for 3 days and 3 nights, and that was at the end of our first full week on this 6-week course. We had to go out. We had $5.
Wow.
$5, and we had, and it just happened that the first week of February that year it was 30 below zero the whole time, and so I lived on the streets, and those 3 days were very, very significant for me, and probably for what I did in the next 30 or 40 years. Like, the kind of negative experience of being alone, cold, no money.
Mm-hmm.
Although I was allowed to take an extra quarter so that I could phone my father-in-law to see if our baby had come yet. That was the only exception to the $5. And it was, as part of our 6 weeks, we had to be placed in an institution in Toronto that would help us to understand from the inside. So like a social planning council, one of the ministers got there. But the assignment I got was to be in City Hall, in the office of the city clerk, who was the person that virtually ran the city of Toronto. And for 4.5 weeks, I was there 5 days a week. And except for in-camera places where nobody could be, I was able to be in his office and discussing with him the issues that are coming up and so on, finding out how a city operates, so that when I came back to Vancouver, a lot of the things that happened in the first 2 or 3 years I was in at First United Church happened because I was able to be confident enough to go to City Hall, to get acquainted with the senior non-elected staff, and to get acquainted with the mayor and the councillors, so that when there were issues that came up, if I phone, I got a call back. I got an invitation to come and have coffee. That type of thing happened.